Hello, I'm James Warman, and I am the author of a couple of books called Stuffocation and Time and How to Spend It. I work for the British government as sector specialist in the experience economy. That's arguably the most boring way to introduce myself. I'm James Warman. I really like the experience economy and I care about it. I've been working in travel for many years. My not quite first job after university, my first job, I worked in Palo Alto actually, in tech. Maybe we should start again. So cut this bit, guys. I'll start again. Hi, my name's James Warman. I've been working in and around travel since about 1997 when I first became a ski guide. I also worked as a tour guide, like a representative for a company. So I worked in France and in Greece. And I've written a couple of books on experiences and the rise of the experience economy. The first book was called Stuffocation, which is really about the rise and the move away from materialism and the rise to experientialism. Instead of looking for happiness, identity, and status in stuff, we're finding happiness, identity, and status in experiences instead. And the next book I wrote was called Time and How to Spend It. So the first book was about this big trend, but it was also about, if you want to be happy, spend less on stuff, more on experiences. I think I was part of the wave that made that that knowledge public to lots of people with this book, Stuffocation. Self-published at first, but then Penguin took it. And I would give talks and I'd be interviewed by people. And they'd say to me, okay, great. So James, you're saying don't spend on stuff, spend on experiences. What kind of experiences should I spend on? And that led to me, well, I didn't know the answer. So it led to me doing a lot of research and then writing a book called Time and How to Spend It. And Time and How to Spend It is, as you can imagine, it's about time and how to spend it, as you can probably guess. And it's ideas that are taken from people much smarter than me at places like Stanford and MIT and NYU and the London School of Economics and Oxford and Cambridge and Tokyo University and other places. And I talk to psychologists and economists and philosophers and historians as smart people and try to bring all their ideas into, an answer to the question, how should you spend your time? And through that research, it became clear to me that there are a whole bunch of reasons why we're wasting time. This is why we call this time wasters. I think there are too many people that wander in to their time off and they wander into their vacations, they wander into their travel without really thinking about why they're doing it and how they could possibly do it better. It's fine. We exist, we live. A really wonderful poem this morning with my kids called The Orange by a woman called Wendy Cope. And if you don't know it, it's so worth looking up. Actually, I was thinking of reading it to you, but that could be too much. But the final line is, I love you. I'm glad I exist. I don't want to spoil the poem, but what's wonderful about it, I think, is it's all this stuff about an orange and the joy of everyday things. But that reminder at the end, I'm glad I exist. Life is irredeemably short, unavoidably short. Our holidays, the chances we get to travel, when you're young and you take a year off, maybe you've got some more time, but most of us have rent to pay, mortgages to pay, kids to bring up, things to do. We don't get so much time. So when you do travel, don't just go there. Don't just waste your time when you get time off. In fact, don't just waste your time here on the planet. There's this lovely poem by a guy called Catullus, a Roman guy. He talks about the brevis lux, the brief light. And at the end of this brevis lux, we get, I think he says, nox una dormienda or something like this. Nox est una dormienda. It's a night that is never ending and in which we're asleep. So once it closes up, obviously depends on the way you see things. If you're religious and you believe we get another chance or we go somewhere magical, great. But we certainly only get one go round here. So therefore make the most of the time. So this book, this Time and How to Spend It, and this is not a pitch for the book, it's more a pitch for the ideas. It has 7 principles in it. It's the stories checklist, STORIES. And if you spend your time guided by these 7 principles, you are more likely to increase your odds of living a happy, creative, successful life full of stories and great relationships. And then we come back to those reasons why people are wasting their time. It turns out there are about 7 reasons or so that anthropologists and sociologists and economists and stuff have figured out is why we're we're spending our time badly. One of those, of course, is emails. And our phones, in fact, we're connected. We've got all this incoming kind of pressure, these questions all the time. Sorry, this is, I banged my finger playing rugby, by the way. So this is so I'm not just wearing a really strange pink and blue ring. This is to keep my finger in place. I thought I'd mention that. I failed to catch a rugby ball. I was trying to show off to my kids in the park how high I could kick the ball. Turns out I can kick the ball quite high. Turns out I can't catch it very cleanly. Hence, broken tendon in the finger. So, okay, all this incoming messages, also the opportunities of today. If you think what life was like and the possibilities for life a couple hundred years ago before the Industrial Revolution, we didn't have escape rooms. We couldn't go to, you could go to another country for a weekend. You can go to Copenhagen or to New York or to, I don't know, wherever is convenient for you, wherever you are in the world. We also earn more. And the thing is about, if we exist in an economic system, if we earn more, therefore our time feels more precious because it has a higher value. There's also the fact that busyness is associated with status. So we tend to want to appear busier because that gives us status. That's why your boss sometimes sends you an email at 5 a.m. and why you send an email late at night to make the point that you're working hard. And also, of course, the problem with the fact that we can work from home. Work used to be a place that we went to. Of course, work is now a thing that you do, and we can all work. And even especially actually during this COVID period, I saw data that shows that people are working like 25% more being at home because, of course, it blurs. I used to work at this trend forecasting company. I'm a trend forecaster by background, and we came up with the term bleisure for business and leisure being mixed. And there's real issues with that because it's really good to have separation. Actually, this is a interesting piece of research about what's the word. You can trick yourself into taking more time off by proving to yourself that it's functional something. Somebody, I think at Columbia or Harvard, came up with this term about if you kid yourself that you're doing something functional with your time, you're more likely to take time away. So if you're an entrepreneur or you're busy with work and you're really focused on making a difference and being successful, the truth is taking time away from work will make you better at work. It'll make you more creative. As Alex Soojung Kim Pang, the author, wrote the book Shorter, real advocate for the 4-day week. His previous book looked at time off and the importance of time off. It turns out that people are super creative and successful tend to only work, it's about like 4 or 5 hours a day. And he's an advocate, as I said, for the 4-day working week. So taking time off is super important, but then how you spend that time is really important. One of the other things why we struggle to spend our time well, as well as having all this incoming stuff, being connected all the time through our smartphones, is we're not educated to spend our time well. If you think about it, everyone wants to get better at social media and get an MBA and be better at the skills of production, not the skills of consumption. We've been taught to buy as much stuff as possible, to want as much stuff as possible, because that creates our system. And that, let's face it, consumer-driven capitalism has been the greatest force for good, arguably in the history of mankind. We're now in a situation where we can feed quite a lot of the people on the planet. We have very high standards of living compared to our ancestors, and that's given us a whole bunch of problems as well. But so the education system is about, we learn how to be great producers, not consumers. And I think we need to push back against that because our time is our most valuable commodity. You can always go get more money. You can stretch your time a bit more by doing like weightlifting and by eating vegetables and stuff, but you can't push it by that much. Time is in short supply. So let's use it well, let's not waste it. So just thought I'd talk today briefly about some of these ideas in stories. Maybe it's worth saying what they stand for. I should also probably mention that I work for the British government as a sector specialist in the experience economy. I'm a member of the exec committee of something called Expresso, the Experience Research Society, which is a group, quite a new group of academics around the world who are studying experience design, from well-being, from travel, from all different areas. Kind of interesting, actually, really interesting. I'm an advisor to the TTC, the Transformational Travel Council, which is really leading the way in transformational travel and helping others to appreciate that there's no point in going there and coming back again, and you just carry on. You should go there and that should change you, have an opportunity for change. And then when you come back, you should be new and different in some way. I also run something called the WXO, the World Experience Organization, that's bringing together people way more creative and thoughtful than me. People like Vince Kadlubeck at Meow Wolf, people like Jake at the TTC, who are pushing the boundaries in different areas of experiences so that we don't waste our time. You know, look at what Vince and his team at Meow Wolf have produced, obviously in Santa Fe, but also in Las Vegas. That this is a superb way to spend your time. Look at the work that Swamp Motel is doing in terms of how they flipped during COVID to create online games that I think transform you in the moment, turn you and a group of people into a team, and give you something that's a good way to spend your time. Okay, so one thought that I have, and something I often share with friends and with family, and this came from the research for this book, Stories, is the E of the stories is extraordinary. And okay, let me share with you. So it turns out that extraordinary stuff makes us super happy, but so does really ordinary stuff too, which is why this poem, The Orange by Wendy Cope, is so fantastic. You know, a simple orange. If you forget the joy of oranges, you're missing this. And I was a little bit stuck actually in the book about what I could call this, because if ordinary things make us happy and extraordinary things make us happy, wow, what do we do with that? Or, what have I got to say? I'm like, everything makes us happy. Well, that's obviously not true. The key, I think, is chiaroscuro, this mix of light and dark. And we should, if every day was Christmas Day, it wouldn't be Christmas Day. But even ordinary things, if you treat them specially, and I think this is research by Cassie McGilner-Holmes at UCLA, if you treat an ordinary weekend as special, you get more joy from it. It's a kind of curious idea, but it's also kind of useful because when you go into the 2 days off that you have, if you treat it as something special, you won't just sit there texting with somebody. You won't just ignore your family. You'll actually realize the magic that is. I'm going to borrow from The Office, the one of the final lines of the last edition of the US version of The Office. That guy says, it's a wonderful line. He says, I wish there was a way to know that you're in the good old days before you've actually left them. I love that reminder that we are in the good old days. And while I'm doing this, I'm going to play with Ferris Bueller. Younger people have no idea what I'm talking about. It's a great movie from the 80s. And there's this great line that he says that life moves pretty fast. You don't stop and look around once in a while, you could miss it. So we should all stop and realize that we're in the good old days and look around once in a while. And when we do, let's not waste our time. Let's get the most from our time. And this idea of extraordinary from this E of the stories checklist is there are 3 people you should think about when you're designing time. And those 3 people are, and this is all taken from, like I say, this is from psychologists in particular here. You're designing for the anticipating self, the experiencing self, and the remembering self. And the weird thing is here, okay, that we all think about the experiencing self. The person who's actually going to be, the you who's going to take a week. Let's say you have a weekend camping, or the weekend of your bachelor party, or stag do, or your hen party, or the week, when you get married, or a weekend. Okay, that weekend lasts 2-3 days. Maybe it's a long weekend. Maybe you go crazy and go 4 days. But whatever, it lasts a short period of time. That's who we focus on. But how about these other people, the anticipating self, the remembering self? And I think this is interesting because let's start with the anticipating self. Anticipation is free happiness. It's one of the reasons why experiences are better than material goods at making us happy. And so one of the things I say to people when I run workshops or keynotes or whatever, I guess like this, right, is say to people, book something in the future. Book it. Book lunch with an old friend or someone you really like, right? Not someone you don't really want to see, someone that you really like. Book lunch 4 months away, because then, and ideally you'll book the place, and maybe it's a favorite of yours, whatever. You may even see them between now and then, doesn't matter. The point is that you'll have that thing to look forward to. So at the moment where it depends on where you are in the world in terms of how stuck you are, these lockdowns, wow, they're dragging, but don't worry, they'll come to a close fairly soon. book some time and plan for those holidays. That is just nothing but free happiness. Okay, so that's the anticipating self. The experiencing self will come. That's the person who gets to do this stuff. But let's think about the remembering self, because the thing is, for a weekend away, the experiencing self has, let's say the anticipating self has, let's say you book it 6 months in advance. You've got 6 months to look forward to it. That is really, this is free happiness. The person experiencing it has in 3 days of joy, or, maybe some challenges. There should be some challenges, but, let's stay with that. And then the remembering self gets to enjoy the memory of those 3 days, depending on how old you are, for decades, until you die or get Alzheimer's or dementia and you forget that thing, right? But the thing is, from that point of view, the person who's going to get the most from this thing is the remembering self, which is kind of a curious thought. So then you should think, I think, how would you design something if you were designing for the remembering self? Now, one of the things that you would not design for is to go on a holiday, to go to some place and sit on a sun lounger by a pool, because there's nothing wrong with sitting by pools. There's nothing wrong with sitting on a sun lounger, but not for a week, not for any significant length of time, because you'll look back and say, what did we do? Oh yeah, we did nothing, right? I mean, that's just nothing. When you think about that remembering self, something has to happen. I mean, that's the simple part of it. The other part is this. So when we look back on things, there are 3 things that we tend to remember. And I think of these as the B rules, B-E-E, B rules, okay? Because, and this is based on something called the Peak End rules, which you may have heard of. But it's also informed by some research by some researchers in New Zealand who particularly looked at longer periods. And so what we tend to remember is that the beginnings, the extremes, and the endings. So what happens in the first 24 hours of a holiday or vacation, we remember. What happens in the final 24 hours, we tend to remember. And then it's the extremes, those kind of crazy, up there moments, and the troughs, okay? They tend to, it's called the peak end rules, but really the peaks and the troughs. And if you think about life, it's the same. If you think about 2015, you probably can't remember much of it, because the truth is most of life is a kind of like, kind of flattish gray line. But then you get the peaks, got the job, got the girl, got the guy, went to the top of that rock in Gibraltar, was late for a flight in Italy and had to drive really fast along the Amalfi Coast, even overtaking people on those crazy corners, which was insane. It's a memory that my wife and I have. And then there's the terrible moments when you got dumped or crashed your parents' car and got caught, or got made redundant or fired from a job, the bad things that happen. Okay, we remember the goods and the bads, and then we remember what happens at the end. So the thing is, when you think about not being a time waster, especially on a holiday, and that lovely line in the TTC book about one of the big lies about travel, that so many people go so far to experience so little. What a waste of time. What a waste of the gift, the opportunity to live, but the opportunity to travel, right? The opportunity to live. Don't live and do not much. Don't do much. What's that? The thing about the man in the arena, of course, it needs to be updated for today. This is from Roosevelt at the Sorbonne in 1911 about it's not the weak souls who stand in the sort of penumbra. It's the people that are in the arena getting dust and mud kicked up and failing and falling down and getting back up and trying again. So anyway, so I'm saying this because when you travel in particular, don't be a time waster, go do something. You should really think about when you first arrive. Too many travel companies will have you arrive somewhere and then you have some time to settle in. What the hell's that about? Because that's the bit you remember. It's boring. When you arrive somewhere, you should do something. When Jake at the TTC and I were designing a trip, we were doing something in Zion National Park in Utah. And when people arrived, they would get there and then they would do some not zip lining. We call it abseiling in the UK. What do the Americans call it? When you hold on to the line. But basically instead of climbing, it's going down. Not zip lining, we call it abseiling. Yeah, you guys call it, Americans call it something else, but anyway, so that you would go through that process. So you'd arrive in the destination. There's a place called Ziggy Bay in Oman. And there, what you can do, because it's right down from some hills, you can take a parapente in French, but it's paraglide, I think in English, parapente. Anyway, you can basically, not parachute, it's not the right term, but you can take off and you can land at the hotel on a parapente, right? Amazing. And you're there. It's that kind of separation. I mean, you can refer to the hero's journey and the importance of crossing the threshold. How do you design the cross the threshold? There was a time when my wife and I got married in a place called Formentera near Ibiza. And Formentera is a wonderful example of this, because you fly from the UK into Ibiza. You usually have to overnight in Ibiza town, which is exquisitely beautiful anyway. We tend to stay in Dout Villa, the old town, and then take a boat ride the next day. It's like an hour or so to San Francesco, I think it's called, in Formentera. And by the time we've done that, we've really crossed the threshold into somewhere else. I wrote a piece for the Times of London newspaper about the places that you could go where you would arrive and then you take an extra journey. So you'd really cross the threshold from, to refer to Christopher Vogler and Joseph Campbell's work about the shape of the hero's journey, the shape of story. You would, cross this threshold. Disney talk about going down the rabbit hole. And so you'd, instead of being in the ordinary world, you'd be in the new world. And I think you can then play, once you've done this cross the threshold, that first thing you do, everything's going to be new. That bell you can hear, by the way, is my dog. Portia, come and say hello. Come on, don't just shake in the background there, because you're messing up my video. Okay, say hello. Okay, that's about it. But I just wanted to make sense that wasn't just some random. You all right? Thank you. But that's just the dog. That first 24 hours is really important. Everything's new, everything's awesome. Okay, then think about the extremes. So how do you design peak experiences? And there's a few different ways of looking at this, but I think FANU is my way, or NAFU, doesn't really matter how you might remember it, but things that are new, things that are unusual, things that, so I've not done FANU, have I? Okay, F is for flow, A is for awe, N is for new, and U is for unusual. These are classic ways to design peak experiences when you're, it's Mihai Csikszentmihalyi's term about when you're so in the moment, you're so in the zone, you're so not thinking about anything else that you can't help be quite joyous. And there's a whole bunch of stuff around this. Skiing is a superb example of something when you're in flow. There's different ways of parsing this and thinking about flow. There's mini flow as well as the kind of real peak experiences. You think about, and I'm borrowing this from Patty Freeman at Brigham Young University, IDEA, I-D-E-A, of immersion, delight, engagement, and absorption, different ways of thinking about how you can design experiences that really throw somebody into the mix. Immersion is more traditional kind of idea of flow, where you're physically active and kind of responding to things in the moment. Delight is about, well, you know, that delight when somebody brings you amazing food or someone brings you terrible food, or when you sort of turn the corner and you suddenly see. I've had this driving, I lived in Palo Alto, and I remember driving up to San Francisco, and you come out a particular corner, all of a sudden, boom, there's San Francisco in front of you. And I remember doing the same in Portugal, driving up from the south, coming to Lisbon. And there's one of those great big statues like the one in Rio de Janeiro. And this bridge that's so high that goes across the River Tagus. Tejo, I guess, but Tagus, I think it is. But you just sort of come out and, you know, there's the city over there, and you're on this incredibly high bridge. It's a moment of just sheer delight. The E is for engagement, when you're really engaged in the story. That's the typical kind of thing. So you could, you know, so it could be the story of your journey if you're traveling. The A is for absorption, and absorption is much more about, it's associated with awe, really. It's kind of seeing an amazing sunset. It could be looking at amazing mountains, you know, the Matterhorn or the Himalayas. It could be, I live in London, and in West London, and we have beautiful sunsets here across the river. I'm just about 500 yards away from the River Thames. And if I go out there at the right time of day on my paddleboard, It's really quiet and it's escape from the city and the view. It's great. So IDEA is ways to think about designing flow, or I've mentioned new unusual is kind of, I guess, obvious. So when you think about the design, coming back to what this is about, to not be a time waster, think about the design of your time, of your holidays. Think about how you can design peak experiences, and that FANU, an idea, I hope are useful checklist formulae. There's never quite a formula for anything that's creative. A formula, a checklist is not a straitjacket. It's the execution that counts. It's what happens that counts. But checklists have been shown. I'm referring here to Atul Gawande's The Checklist Manifesto. Checklists are awesome as starting points to remind us to do the good stuff. Okay, and finally then, thinking about the ending. So the ending is, again, it's super important. So maybe you could design a peak experience. Maybe you can think about the stuff that happens at the beginning. But the ending is quite different to the beginning. And I think this is where really good travel designers can make their mark, because I think here, to think about the ending, it should be different to the beginning, obviously. And I think you can use the structure of the hero's journey, which is the archetypal story told by all human societies around the world. And think about how the beginning is the takeoff and the end is the landing. And if you can bring everything together, then it will solidify those, the learnings, the experiences that you've had. That could be anything as like a sharing circle if you're in a group. But if you think about a simple way of think about the weekend. Friday night, you go out and you go crazy. Sunday night, you have, or Sunday lunch, or lunchtime, you have Sunday lunch and you settle. You can think of this in terms of, and I'm borrowing from, I think, anthropology here, in terms of search and savor, explore and exploit. And there's an important element of integration towards the end as well, bringing together everything that you've learned and everything you might have gone through your journey. Okay, I'll bring this together. I hope you stay to the end. I hope that was at least vaguely interesting. The key is, don't be a time waster. Time is short. You can use stuff that scientists have figured out to get more from your time, to get more from your travel, and to not only set something up for your anticipating self and your experiencing self, but create really awesome stories and memories that act as capital and will make you richer, literally, in the most meaningful sense of the term, and give you more stories, which will lead to more relationships, which will make you happier, and you'll be more successful and more creative. So don't waste your time, get more from your time. I hope that was interesting. Oh, I'm James Woolman, by the way. Thanks. Bye-bye.